He stood up, raised his champagne glass, and smiled like a man about to deliver a toast. But what came out of Russell Delaney's mouth wasn't a tribute to our daughter. It was a declaration of war. I've decided to start a new chapter in my life. Without Margaret. The room fell silent, so abruptly I could hear someone drop a fork. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, scanning for the expected breakdown. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I simply looked at him, nodded once, and reached into my purse. The envelope I slid across the white linen tablecloth was cream-colored, thick, unassuming. Russell blinked at it, momentarily confused. "What's this?" he asked, still holding the glass midair. "A little something for you to read later," I said softly, not even bothering to hide the steel beneath my calm. Across the table, Fiona, our daughter, still in her cap and gown, stared at her father like he had grown horns. Her eyes searched mine for answers I wasn't ready to give. Not yet. Today was still her day. I leaned over and kissed her cheek. "I am so proud of you," I whispered. "No one gets to steal that from you." Then I stood up, smoothed the navy silk of my dress, and turned to the room. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Fiona's incredible achievement. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon." And I walked out, past the astonished faces of our friends, past the servers frozen in place, holding trays of stuffed mushrooms and champagne, past Tessa Monroe, yes, her, the much younger woman Russell had been pretending not to sleep with, who shrank back into her chair like a child caught sneaking candy. The heavy glass doors of the Charleston Club closed behind me with a hush. Outside, the heat of late May wrapped around me like a weighted blanket. My heels clicked against the stone steps, steady and sure. I didn't look back. Not until I heard the doors burst open behind me. "Margaret!" Russell's voice wasn't smooth anymore. It was shrill, panic, demanding. "What the hell is this? What did you just hand me?" I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I let the heat press against my skin and the breeze play with the edge of my shawl. It was the first time in years I had walked away from him without fear, and I liked the feeling. That envelope contained the beginning of my revenge. I'd spent the last 3 months preparing it, quietly, precisely like a woman who'd been burned before and refused to be caught off guard again. I knew Russell would try to humiliate me. I just didn't know he'd do it in front of our daughter, in front of my friends, in front of God and the grilled scallops. But maybe it was better this way. There were no more illusions. We had been married for 28 years. For 26 of those, I had put him first. His business ventures, his crises, his moods. I had stepped back from my own career in finance to raise Fiona, to support Russell's dreams. Even when those dreams changed every 6 months. Even when they cost us money we didn't have. And now he was done with me. Fine. But he'd made one mistake. He thought I'd be helpless without him. He forgot I was the one who paid the bills, who managed the accounts, who filed the taxes. He forgot I knew where the money was hidden and where the debts were buried. He forgot I was the one who kept the whole damn house standing. He was about to remember. 3 months before Fiona's graduation day, I started noticing the numbers didn't add up. Not lipstick on a collar, not late-night texts, just numbers. And I've never been the kind of woman who ignores numbers. I've always managed our household finances, every utility bill, every tuition payment, every line of our retirement plan. So when I saw a $247 withdrawal showing up every Tuesday like clockwork, it set off something in me. ATM withdrawal South Battery Bistro. Not a place we ever went. Too upscale for lunch, too romantic for Russell and his business meetings. It wasn't our kind of restaurant. It was the kind of place where anniversaries happened. Or affairs. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew how Russell operated. He was slippery with words, quick to accuse me of overreacting, dramatic, insecure. No, if something was going on, I needed evidence. I needed leverage. So I waited. I started printing out our bank statements, weekly, highlighting every unusual transaction. I called the bank and confirmed he'd recently opened a new personal account, something he hadn't even mentioned. A small account, slowly fed by transfers from our joint fund. The amounts weren't large enough to be noticed by someone distracted, but I wasn't distracted. I was paying attention. And then I saw her, Tessa Monroe, at a community fundraiser in mid-March. She wasn't supposed to be there, at least not in that dress, wearing that necklace. It was a delicate rose gold chain with a moonstone pendant from a boutique in Savannah where Russell had once bought me jewelry for our 20th anniversary. He claimed they stopped selling that style. I guess they just stopped selling it to me. Tessa was young, early 30s, loud laugh, polished nails, always networking just a little too hard. I'd brushed her off in the past as one of Russell's professional hangers-on, but now she wore that necklace like a trophy. And I knew. Still, I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I made an appointment with an attorney. "Do you have a prenup?" he asked after skimming the folder I brought in. "Russell insisted on it," I replied. "And does it include a fidelity clause?" "It does. And it doesn't expire." The attorney smiled faintly. "Then we have a very strong start." From that day forward, I built a case. I documented every transaction, every reservation, every purchase that didn't line up. I screenshot messages when Russell left his phone unlocked, messages about finally being free, about beachfront homes, about how he'd tell me everything right after Fiona's graduation, because I wouldn't make a scene in public. He really thought I'd just sit there and take it, that I was too soft, too proud, too old to fight back. He underestimated the woman who once paid our mortgage on a single income while he found himself. He forgot who carried this family through every failed venture, every financial drought. I printed everything, organized it into a black zippered binder, and slid it beneath my bed. I didn't talk to anyone, not my sister-in-law Rachel, not even Fiona. I didn't want her final semester clouded by family scandal. But every time Russell smiled at me across the dinner table, I remembered the restaurant receipts. Every time he kissed my cheek in front of friends, I remembered the hotel bookings. Every time he claimed we needed to cut back before retirement, I remembered the $6,000 bracelet charged to a card I didn't know he had. I didn't cry. I planned. Because when a man decides to humiliate you publicly, you only get one chance to decide how the world sees you. And I had already made up my mind. He would regret underestimating me. By early April, I stopped hoping Russell would come clean. That hope had died somewhere between the fake business lunches and the weekend real estate seminars that never showed up on his calendar. What replaced it wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was focus. I was done reacting. I was ready to respond with precision. April 3rd, I met with my attorney again. His office overlooked the Ashley River, tucked into a quiet building with ivy crawling up its brick walls. Inside, everything was polished mahogany and soft lighting. But I wasn't there to feel comfortable. I was there to finalize a strategy. "I want the divorce papers filed the morning of Fiona's graduation," I said. He blinked, caught off guard. "You don't want to wait until after?" "He's planning to announce he's leaving me that afternoon," I replied. "I just want to beat him by 6 hours." He leaned back, gave a low whistle. "He doesn't know you've caught on." "No," I said. "He still thinks I'm in the dark. That's what makes it fun." We filed the petition that afternoon. Everything was prepared, signed, and time-stamped, sealed until it would be served at 9 a.m. on graduation day. No one would know until it was too late for him to maneuver. Back at home, Russell was chipper. That evening, he poured wine like we were still in some second honeymoon phase. He joked about Fiona's future and told me how proud he was of her. I watched him over the rim of my glass, cataloging every lie that slid so easily from his mouth. What's the word for that moment when you finally stop loving someone, whatever it is? I reached it that night. In mid-April, I discovered more. The beachfront condo in Isle of Palms. He'd toured it with Tessa 3 times. The leasing agent had left a voicemail confirming Mr. and Mrs. Delaney's application. I called back and politely corrected them. There was no Mrs. Delaney on that lease. Not the one they thought, anyway. I let it slide. I wanted them to think everything was going according to plan. I updated my files. Bank records, signed affidavits, timeline breakdowns. I knew if this ever went to court, Russell would claim I was hysterical or vengeful. So I left a paper trail even a judge couldn't ignore. The final detail? A copy of the prenup. I found it in our home safe, tucked behind tax records he hadn't looked at in years. His own signature, clear as day, next to the clause he'd once insisted on. Infidelity voids claim to shared property, including primary residence. He'd written that clause to protect himself from me. Now it would protect me from him. I slipped a clean, notarized copy into a cream envelope and slid it into my purse. The same purse I would carry to Fiona's graduation lunch. The same envelope I would slide across the table, next to the plate of a man too arrogant to know the storm he'd walked into. On April 28th, 5 days before graduation, Tessa texted him, "Everything's almost perfect. I can't wait to start fresh with you." I didn't need to read the rest. I just forwarded the message to my attorney and deleted it from his phone. Not because I was covering for him, but because I wanted him to be completely unprepared when everything unraveled. Russell thought he was setting the stage for a grand exit. He had no idea I'd already written the final act, and when the curtain fell, I'd be the only one standing. The morning of May 3rd dawned like any other spring morning in Charleston. Hazy light seeping through the bedroom shutters, the low hum of cicadas already buzzing beyond the glass. The kind of morning that begged for calm, but I wasn't calm. I was ready. I woke at 5:45 long before Russell. He snored gently beside me, blissfully unaware that by the time he stood up to deliver his little "I'm leaving you" speech, I'd already made mine. In legal ink. I took my time getting dressed. Navy silk dress, pearl earrings, low heels. Simple, classic, appropriate for a mother attending her only child's college graduation. But everything I wore that day had been chosen like armor. Not to impress, to hold me together. By 7:30, I was in the kitchen brewing coffee. My hands moved automatically, pour, stir, sip, but my mind was racing through details. The file folder was zipped inside my purse. The envelope was ready. The court clerk would release the petition in 90 minutes. By 8:10, Russell stumbled in, yawning, stretching like nothing in the world was off balance. "You're up early," he said, reaching for a mug. "Big day," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He smiled and kissed my cheek like we were still a team. "Can you believe she's graduating already?" I could. I'd believed in Fiona since she was 6 and explained compound interest better than her father ever could. "We should leave by 9, he said. I made a reservation for lunch afterward. Little surprise I put together. You'll love it." I smiled. I didn't ask where. I already knew. He thought he was leading me into a setup. A perfectly curated scene to announce our separation in public, soften the blow with smiles and champagne flutes. Make himself the hero of the narrative. Instead, I was the one guiding him straight into a minefield he didn't even know existed. At 9 a.m. sharp, I received the text, filed and sealed. "Good luck today." It was from Philip, my attorney. Short and clean, like everything about this plan. Russell was still getting ready. I stepped out onto our back porch, watching the sunlight rise over the garden I had kept alive for 15 years, while he flitted from one failed venture to another. I remembered planting those hydrangeas during his entrepreneurial sabbatical, which turned out to be 6 months of fishing trips and craft beer tastings with men half his age. I wondered if he even remembered the color of those blooms. At 9:40, we pulled out of the driveway. I sat in the passenger seat of the SUV we'd once picked out together like it was a dream car. He chatted about Fiona, about moving to the coast, about nothing at all. Every word just noise now. Hollow and irrelevant. Fiona's graduation was held in the outdoor amphitheater at Charleston University. Rows of folding chairs, students in caps and gowns buzzing with nervous energy. I held my breath when I saw her, our daughter, radiant, confident, alive with possibility. She spotted us from a distance and waved. I smiled and waved back, but a part of me broke. Because Fiona didn't know what was about to happen. She didn't know that the man who had promised to be her anchor would rip our family apart within the hour. And she didn't know that I'd been keeping that storm at bay for months, just long enough for her to walk across that stage without shame in her heart. The ceremony passed in a blur. Applause, speeches, camera flashes. Fiona's name echoed through the loudspeaker, and the crowd cheered. My hands ached from clapping. My face ached from smiling, but I held it together for her. Afterward, we took photos. I stood between them, one arm around Fiona, the other loosely draped around Russell. I doubt I'll ever look at those pictures again, but I posed for them anyway, because some things you do for your child, even when your soul is splintering. At 1:15 p.m., we walked into the Charleston Club. Private dining room, linen-draped tables, chilled champagne waiting. I could smell the ocean through the tall windows. The table was set. The guests were seated. The silverware gleamed. Russell stood to speak, and I smiled. Russell tapped his glass with a spoon. The soft chime echoed through the dining room like a warning bell. Conversations faded. Chairs stilled. Even the waitstaff paused near the doors, sensing something out of place. Everyone, he said, beaming like a politician, thank you for joining us today to celebrate our daughter's incredible achievement. Fiona, we're so proud of you. She smiled, unsure, sensing something off. Russell lifted his champagne glass higher. And since we're all here, I wanted to take a moment to share something personal. Something life-changing. I felt the eyes shift toward me before he even spoke the next words. I've decided, he said, pausing for dramatic effect, to begin a new chapter of my life, one where Margaret and I will be going our separate ways. There it was, a quiet gasp from somewhere to my left, a clink of glass on wood. Fiona's face fell, confusion flickering into horror. Russell, I said softly. He turned, surprised I was speaking at all. I reached into my purse. From it, I pulled the cream-colored envelope, the same one I'd sealed 3 weeks earlier, after double-checking every clause, every asset line, every timestamp. I set it beside his plate. Neat. Deliberate. What's this? He asked, his confident facade twitching. Something for you to read later. My voice didn't waver. Fiona looked between us, mouth slightly open. Her cap still rested askew on her curls, and her eyes, those eyes I'd once watched in a hospital bassinet, were wide with panic. I turned to her, brushed a curl from her cheek, and smiled. This is still your day, sweetheart, I whispered. Don't let anyone take that from you. Then I turned to the room. My voice was even, measured, like I was reading a thank you card rather than unraveling a marriage. Thank you all for being here to celebrate Fiona. She's earned every bit of this joy. Please enjoy your meal. And I walked out. I didn't look back. Not when the chatter turned into whispers. Not when Russell's voice stammered behind me. Not when someone dropped a fork. The club's heavy wooden doors shut behind me with a dull thud. Outside, the air was thick and warm. Charleston in May. A little cruel. A little beautiful. I stepped out into the sun, pulled my shawl tight, and finally exhaled. Behind me, footsteps. The door burst open. Margaret! Russell's voice had changed. No longer smooth and controlled. It was shrill now, threatening. What the hell is this? He barked, waving the envelope in one hand like it might catch fire. What did you do? I didn't stop walking. You gave me divorce papers on our daughter's graduation day. No, I said, still walking. I gave them to you before your little speech. That's the difference between strategy and spectacle. He caught up beside me, still puffing like a man who'd lost control of a room and didn't know why. You think you've won. I stopped. Finally, I turned. I'm not trying to win, Russell. I'm trying to get free. He blinked, thrown off. The prenup is expired, he hissed. You don't get to keep everything. You don't get to act like I'm the bad guy. I took a breath. Calm. Measured. Section 14, I said. Fidelity clause. Stays in effect until the dissolution of marriage is finalized. You should have read what you signed. His face drained of color. I leaned in, just enough for him to hear the next part. You insisted on that clause to protect yourself. 28 years ago, before you had a penny to your name. And now it's going to cost you everything. Behind him, the club's tall windows reflected his stunned face. A man dressed for victory, but walking into his own funeral. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I was already walking away. Each step down that path felt heavier and lighter at the same time, like shedding armor I never wanted to wear. The sun was blinding now, but I didn't need to see what was behind me. I already knew what it looked like. The end of his story, the beginning of mine. I arrived home before him. Of course I did. He had stayed behind to explain, to deflect, to spin. Russell always preferred to control the story, while I had already written the ending. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet. Our home, an old federal-style house just north of Charleston's historic quarter, had always been full of life, of clutter, of conversations drifting from room to room. But that afternoon it felt like a shell, the version of our life that Russell had curated for social media, but never lived in fully. The air was cool. The faint smell of lavender from the linen spray I always used still lingered. And yet everything felt staged, like a memory I no longer wanted to walk through. I went upstairs to the primary bedroom, opened the closet, and there it was, 2 black Samsonite suitcases, packed, hidden behind his side of the winter coats. He'd been planning this getaway carefully. Clothes rolled neatly, a folder on top with labeled documents, banking, passport copies, a rental lease with Tessa Monroe's name beside his. He thought he would just leave, just vanish, just reinvent himself. I smiled. He never imagined I'd flip the script first. I didn't unpack the suitcases. I didn't touch anything. I simply took photos of everything, date-stamped and filed into my growing folder titled Russell's Escape Plan. Documentation was its own kind of weapon. I had learned that long ago in corporate finance. It's not what you feel. It's what you can prove. At 6:18 p.m., I heard the garage door rattle open. The door slammed harder than it needed to. He was home. "Margaret!" he shouted from the hallway, as though nothing had happened, as though we were in the middle of some routine spat that could be handled with wine and avoidance. I was in the living room, sitting with my laptop open, reviewing a spreadsheet for one of the divorce attorneys I had quietly begun consulting for. It felt poetic. He stormed in, envelope still clutched in his hand like it had burned him. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving it. "You already know," I said. "You served me divorce papers today of all days? Fiona's graduation." "You planned your little speech for today," I replied evenly. I just adjusted the timeline. "You had no right. I had every right." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't shout. It just stands there, solid and still. "You think you're going to take the house? The assets? The prenup doesn't even apply anymore. That thing's practically antique." I closed my laptop gently. "Actually, no. It's valid. Section 12. The fidelity clause is enforceable for the duration of the marriage. You signed that, Russell. You insisted on it." He blinked hard. The realization was starting to sink in. He hadn't consulted a lawyer before all this. He thought I would crumble, that I'd beg him to stay, that I'd trade dignity for stability. But he was wrong. I stood and walked toward the fireplace, where our wedding photo still sat on the mantel. I looked at it, not with longing, not with pain, but with clinical detachment. "I spent 28 years protecting this family," I said quietly, "while you took risks, while you flailed and wandered and reinvented yourself every 6 months. I waited for you to land. And you never did. He didn't speak. Not right away. His face was pale now, the edges red with frustration. You've always been calculating, he said, trying to turn it on me. But this is cold. No, Russell, I said, finally facing him. Cold was what you did, taking our money, lying to our daughter, humiliating me in front of friends. What I'm doing now. I paused, just long enough to let it settle. This is called consequences. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't answer, but I already knew who it was. Tessa. The new life he'd promised her was beginning to unravel before it ever had the chance to begin. I left that night, not because I had to, but because I wanted him to sit in the silence of the house he'd planned to abandon me in. Let him stew in it. Let him explain to no one why the bedroom closet still held only his suits and nothing else. I drove to Rachel's. My sister-in-law lived in a small blue Craftsman just 10 minutes from the university, tucked behind a row of old oaks and creaking front porches. She was waiting on the steps, barefoot, arms folded, her face already lit with fire. I just heard, she said as I stepped out of the car. He actually did it. He did, I said. And you served him first. I nodded, right before the toast. Rachel let out a low whistle. Damn. Remind me never to get on your bad side. She didn't ask if I was okay. Rachel never wasted words on questions when the answer was obvious. Instead, she opened the door, led me inside, and poured wine without speaking. We settled into her sunroom, surrounded by old books, mismatched cushions, and the faint scent of lemon polish. I remember when he made you sign that prenup, she said after a while, swirling the wine in her glass. He was so paranoid, so sure he was going to be rich someday. He was protecting himself from the woman who paid for his first startup, I replied. The irony writes itself. We laughed, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Fiona. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Mom. Her voice cracked immediately. I'm here, I said. I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm already in the car. She hung up. 15 minutes later, she arrived still in her dress, her heels in one hand, mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint. She stepped inside and fell into my arms like she used to when she was little. After scraped knees, bad dreams mean girls. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, voice muffled against my shoulder. Because I didn't want to ruin your semester, I said softly. Or your day. Dad did that anyway, she muttered. We sat on Rachel's couch, Fiona tucked against my side, legs curled beneath her like she had just come in from the cold. I knew something was off, she whispered. He's been distracted for months. Distant. Always texting. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything. Rachel walked in with more wine and a plate of crackers, set them down quietly and left us alone. And then I told Fiona everything. The transfers, the restaurant bills, the fake business trips, the real estate viewings, the photos, the texts, the prenup. I watched her face change as the puzzle pieces locked into place. Shock turned to anger, anger to grief, grief to clarity. She shook her head slowly. I was working 2 jobs this semester. He told me money was tight. He let me believe we were struggling. I nodded. While shopping for beachfront property with someone who calls you that girl from the first marriage. She inhaled sharply. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, I said. I wanted to protect you. I still do. I'm not mad at you, Fiona said. I'm just mad. That's okay. Be mad. She looked up at me. Are we going to be okay? Yes, I said, but not overnight. Her eyes filled again, but she wiped them fast. Then her jaw set. Her voice dropped. He's telling everyone you've gone crazy. I didn't blink. Let him. He's saying you plotted this for months. I did. She blinked at me, but not for the reasons he thinks. I showed her the text from my attorney. The prenup clause, the financial timeline, the black zippered folder, now sitting on Rachel's dining table like a loaded weapon. Fiona exhaled, slowly nodded, and said the words I'll never forget. Good. Then let's finish what he started. The doorbell rang at 10:12 p.m. Rachel peeked through the side window and groaned. You've got to be kidding me. She turned to me. It's him. I rose from the couch, heart steady now. Not racing. Not afraid. Just ready. And he's not alone, Rachel added, voice colder now. Tessa's with him. Fiona stood beside me before I could stop her. I want to be here for this. Rachel opened the door. Russell stepped in first. Face flushed, tie loosened, eyes already scanning for weakness. Tessa followed behind, arms crossed, heels clicking on the hardwood. She wore a silk blouse and that moonstone necklace again, like it meant something. The living room felt too small all at once, filled with too much noise, too much ego. Rachel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, silent but coiled. Russell spoke first. Margaret, we need to talk. By all means, I said, talk. He cleared his throat, eyes darting to Fiona. This doesn't involve her. Fiona scoffed. You blew up our family during my graduation lunch. You don't get to decide who's involved anymore. He shifted uncomfortably. This has gotten out of control. You froze the accounts. You're dragging this into court. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. How was it supposed to go, Russell? I asked. You blindside me in public, walk off into the sunset with your girlfriend, and still keep half of everything. His jaw clenched. Tessa placed a hand on his arm. Greg, maybe. I told you not to call me that in front of them, he snapped, brushing her off. Fiona raised an eyebrow. Did you seriously think you could control all of this? That mom would just accept it. Russell ignored her. Turned to me. You always said we were a team. I nodded. We were. Until you changed teams. You're being vindictive, he said. This isn't you. You never knew me, I replied. You knew the version of me that kept quiet so the family didn't collapse. Rachel snorted. Guess what, Russell? It collapsed anyway. He turned on her. Oh, please. You never liked me. She shrugged. You were tolerable until you weren't. Tessa cleared her throat, trying to steady herself. I didn't know he was going to make the announcement like that. I thought he was going to speak to you privately. And yet you sat through the toast like it was a performance, I said. Because it was. She flushed. I'm sorry. The words fell like feathers, weightless, empty. Fiona stepped forward now. Her voice was clear, sharp. You let him use my graduation as a stage. You helped him turn one of the most important days of my life into damage control. And you're sorry. Tessa looked down. Russell tried again. Margaret, let's just be rational. Unfreeze the accounts. Let's avoid dragging our daughter through a courtroom battle. The accounts stay frozen, I said, arms crossed. Until discovery is complete. That's 3 more days. You can survive. Russell's voice rose. With what? You locked me out of everything. No, I said calmly. I left you access to your personal account, the one you've been moving money into for over a year. That should be more than enough. Tessa's head snapped toward him. You have a separate account, she asked. He hesitated. It's just for logistics. How much is in it? She pressed. Silence. She looked back at me, then at him. Her face changed. That apartment you promised me, that car, none of it's happening, is it? Russell stammered, but Tessa had already stepped away from him, arms folded tightly. Wow, she said quietly. You lied to both of us. Welcome to the club, I muttered. Rachel gave a slow, satisfied nod. And just like that, the pyramid collapses. Russell turned to Fiona, reaching out. Sweetheart, please, don't let her poison you against me. She stepped back. You did that all by yourself. Silence followed. Heavy. Complete. Finally, I spoke. You have until tomorrow at 6 p.m. to remove your belongings from the house. After that, the locks change. Margaret, this isn't a negotiation. He stared at me, furious, stunned, hollow. Tessa turned and left without a word. Russell followed a moment later, muttering something under his breath. The door closed behind them. Fiona looked at me. You didn't raise your voice once. I didn't need to. The next morning, I met Philip outside the Charleston County Courthouse. It was overcast, gray skies, damp air, and that faint scent of rain on brick. I wore navy slacks, a blazer, and low heels. No drama, just business, the way I always handled things. Philip handed me a copy of the emergency filing. It's done, he said. Discovery opens Monday. You'll have full access to trace the offshore transfers. And the freeze? I asked. Upheld. He can't touch joint funds, investment accounts, or real estate equity until we're through the full hearing. I nodded. Good. Philip glanced at his watch. He's going to panic. That's the point. By noon, the fallout had already started. Rachel called me from work. Her voice was low, urgent, thrilled. You're not going to believe this, she said. Tessa's packing up her desk. She just stormed out of her office. Told someone she was lied to about everything. I didn't laugh. Not yet. She found out the beachfront condo lease never went through, Rachel continued. Turns out the leasing agent called to confirm a credit discrepancy on the home phone. You handled that, didn't you? I did. And the car? Cancelled. Rachel whistled. Girl! By 3 p.m. the rumors were flying. Not because I spread them. I didn't have to. Charleston social circles were old money polite on the surface. But when someone fell from grace, the whispers spread like wildfire behind garden gates and tennis club bars. Russell had spent years building an image. Self-made, charming community leader. But those same people now discovered the truth. That he'd moved funds behind my back, that his new chapter had collapsed before it began, and that he'd underestimated the one person who knew his every weakness. I got a text from a longtime acquaintance. If you ever decide to run a war room, count me in. At 4:42 p.m., Tessa called me. I stared at the name blinking across the screen for a long time before I picked up. Margaret. Her voice was small. Hello. I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't know who else to call. I waited. I moved in with him, she said. I believed everything he told me. About you. About Fiona. About the money. I stayed silent. I didn't know the prenup was real. I didn't know he was using me as a prop to make his exit look justified. She sounded broken. I'm not looking for sympathy, she added quickly. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For your daughter. For how today went. For being stupid. I let the pause stretch. Then I said, I appreciate the apology. I don't need it, but Fiona might. She sniffed audibly. He promised me a future. Said you were the one keeping him from it. He was the one keeping himself from it, I replied. He always was. Silence. Then, he said you'd come after him for everything. I didn't have to come after him, I said. He handed it all to me in a folder 28 years ago. Another pause. Then, he's not who I thought he was. No, I said, but now you are. She didn't respond, just hung up. I stared at my phone for a long while, then turned it off. Set it face down. Let the silence settle like dust. That evening, Fiona came home with 2 bottles of wine and takeout from our favorite Italian place. You should have seen his face today, she said, unwrapping garlic knots. He was flailing. Did he try to defend himself? Worse, he tried to rewrite the story. Told one of my professors you'd manipulated him into marrying you. I raised an eyebrow. Did he mention I funded his first business? No, but she Googled him. We laughed, and for the first time in a long time it felt real. No masks, no pretending, just mother and daughter, starting over. By 9 p.m., we were sitting on the back porch, feet up, wine half gone. You know what the best part is, Fiona said. He thought he had the upper hand, right up until you slid that envelope across the table. I smiled. That envelope, I said, wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of your empire. The hearing was set for Tuesday, May 9th. The rain came early that morning, soft and steady, tapping against the courthouse windows like a slow drumbeat. I arrived 15 minutes early with Philip, my attorney, binder in hand, calm as stone. Not a shred of makeup out of place, not a single paper missing. Russell arrived at 9:01 a.m., late, flustered, wearing a wrinkled blazer that still had the tag thread hanging from the cuff. His new attorney, some fresh-faced associate from a corporate firm in Mount Pleasant, trailed behind him like a lost intern. He hadn't hired a family lawyer. He didn't think he'd need one. That was his first mistake. We sat at opposite tables in a courtroom that smelled faintly of mildew and cheap carpet cleaner. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Justice Elkins, entered with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen too many men like Russell crash into their own egos. She adjusted her glasses, flipped through the file, and looked up. This is regarding the financial emergency motion in Caldwell versus Caldwell, she said, eyes sharp. Mrs. Caldwell, your filing indicates a violation of the financial transparency clause in the prenuptial agreement. Is that correct? Philip stood. Yes, Your Honor. We've provided documentation of systematic fund transfers, unauthorized joint account activity, and evidence of marital infidelity, activating Section 12 of the prenup. Justice Elkins turned to Russell. Do you contest the validity of the agreement? His lawyer cleared his throat. We believe the prenup has expired due to the length of the marriage. She nodded, flipped to Section 18, and read aloud. This agreement shall remain valid for the duration of the marriage and any legal proceedings stemming from its dissolution. She looked over her glasses at Russell. Seems airtight to me. Russell leaned in to whisper something to his lawyer, who nodded. But his ears were red now, his posture sinking. And the evidence of concealed funds? She asked. Philip handed over our file. Over $78,000 transferred discreetly across 9 months, itemized with bank statements, dates, and corresponding restaurant and lodging charges for his extramarital partner. Justice Elkins skimmed the folder. Did you seriously think this would go unnoticed, Mr. Caldwell? I didn't mean, Russell began, but the judge cut him off with a raised hand. I've ruled on more than 300 divorce hearings, and I've yet to see a man dig his own grave so cleanly. She set the file aside. The freeze on joint accounts will remain in place. The court finds probable violation of financial disclosure terms and upholds the infidelity clause. Russell's jaw dropped. Additionally, she continued, the primary residence shall remain in Mrs. Caldwell's possession pending the final settlement. All vacation and investment properties tied to joint accounts will be reviewed under marital asset division guidelines. Philip leaned toward me. You're winning. I didn't smile. Not yet, but I exhaled for the first time that morning. Russell's face had gone from red to gray. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into his own file folder. The judge banged the gavel once. Final hearing set for June 12th. Court is adjourned. Outside, the rain had stopped. Russell caught up to me in the hallway, one hand clutching his file, the other shoved deep in his pocket. Margaret, please, he said. We don't have to do this in court. We can figure something out. I turned slowly. You had months to figure something out. You chose secrecy, deception, humiliation. I made a mistake. No, I said, calm and cold. You made a decision, and now you get to live with it. He looked like he might say more, but he didn't. Just stood there, shoulders caved, soaked by consequences he never thought would reach him. Philip and I walked away without looking back. That night, I poured myself 1 glass of wine and stood at the kitchen window, watching water drip off the hydrangeas. I had once built a life with a man who lied with confidence and smiled while he did it. But now, piece by piece, I was building something else entirely, and he was left with the ruins. It was the second Sunday after the hearing when Rachel called again. Her voice, as usual, carried the delicious edge of barely contained glee. "She's gone," she said. "Packed up, moved out, told everyone at the office she needed to find herself again." I didn't have to ask who. "Tessa, she leave him a note?" I asked, sipping my tea. "Nope," Rachel replied. "She left him a cold cup of coffee and an empty apartment." I chuckled. That's one way to end a fantasy. Apparently, after the preliminary hearing, things had unraveled fast. The vacation condo had fallen through due to credit issues. The sports car Russell had promised was repossessed when the financing bounced. And worst of all, for his ego at least, Tessa had realized she wasn't getting the glamorous second wife life she'd been sold. She wanted beachfront walks and cocktail parties. What she got was overdraft fees and frozen assets. By June, she was gone. I never heard from her again. Russell tried, of course. He sent emails, long, rambling ones, blaming the lawyers, blaming me, blaming miscommunication. At one point, he even blamed Fiona, as if her disappointment had somehow been a betrayal. I never replied. I had more important things to do, like rebuilding my life. With the house officially under my name, I started clearing it of everything that wasn't truly mine. Photos came down. Awards with his name went into boxes. I kept the books, the garden tools, and the lemon tree we had planted the year Fiona turned 10. That tree still thrived, unlike the marriage. By July, I'd signed a lease on a small office space downtown, a converted row house with creaky floors, tall windows, and just enough room for 2 desks and a coffee station. I hung a sign by the door. Whitmore Financial Transitions, helping women navigate what comes next. My first client was a widow in her 60s, terrified of outliving her money. My second was a woman divorcing a man who reminded me far too much of Russell. By the end of summer, I had a full calendar and a waiting list. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Fiona came by every Sunday for brunch, sometimes with files to help me organize a marketing plan, sometimes with a bottle of wine and a stack of photos to go through. One morning in late August, she stood in the doorway of my new office, arms crossed, watching me set up client folders. "You're different now," she said. I looked up. "Good different, or—" She smiled. "The best kind. Like you finally took off a heavy coat you didn't realize you'd been wearing for decades." I paused, hand still on a binder. She was right. I had spent so many years protecting, softening, smoothing, keeping Russell afloat, keeping Fiona unaware, keeping the image intact. Now I was just me. No mask, no script, no man explaining my value for me. That night, I sat alone on the back porch again. The air was still. The lemon tree rustled faintly in the dark. I thought about everything I had lost, and realized I hadn't lost anything I truly needed. Russell had underestimated me, so had almost everyone else. But in that quiet evening stillness, I finally understood something I'd never dared admit before. I hadn't just gotten my life back. I had created one I actually wanted. The final hearing fell on a Monday, June 12th. It would have been our 29th wedding anniversary. I didn't mark it on the calendar. I didn't wear anything symbolic. No black dress, no red lipstick. Just a navy suit, low heels, and the calm composure of a woman who had nothing left to prove. Russell arrived looking like a man hollowed out. His tan had faded, the cocky smirk replaced by sunken eyes and slack shoulders. The ring was gone from his finger, but the indentation remained, a pale circle where something used to be. His new attorney, a more seasoned family lawyer this time, carried 2 thick binders. I brought one. That was enough. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just us, our lawyers, the judge, and a bailiff who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Elkins didn't waste time. The court has reviewed all submitted documents. I find the prenuptial agreement valid and enforceable under South Carolina law, including the infidelity clause. Russell shifted. The division of assets shall proceed as follows. Mrs. Caldwell retains the primary residence, 70% of joint investments, and full access to her retirement accounts. I remained still. Mr. Caldwell retains personal possessions, the contents of his private account, and business holdings as outlined in Exhibit G. I already knew what Exhibit G said. The business was worth very little now. He'd lost 2 contracts after word got out. His credit was shot, and Tessa, as Rachel later told me, was now dating a real estate developer in Mount Pleasant. The gavel came down like a quiet ending. Divorce finalized, Judge Elkins said. Best of luck to you both. I gathered my bag, nodded to Philip, and turned to leave. But Russell followed me into the hallway. Margaret, he said, his voice rough. Wait. I paused. He looked smaller. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I studied him. The man who had once promised me forever, then offered me nothing but silence and betrayal. You said that before, I replied. I know. He exhaled. You were always better than me. Smarter. Stronger. I think that scared me. I didn't respond. I thought I wanted something new, he said, staring at the tiled floor. What I really wanted was to not feel invisible. That stung. Not for him, but for me. For all the years I had poured love into a man who didn't know how to receive it. I hope you find peace, Russell, I said finally. But it won't be with me. He nodded slowly. Do you think someday we could talk again? Maybe as friends? I gave him a soft, sad smile. No, that chapter is closed. His face fell, but he didn't argue, didn't plead, just stood there, alone in the corridor of a courthouse he never imagined himself in. I turned and walked away, heels echoing with every step, each one further from who I used to be, and closer to the woman I had become. Outside, the Charleston sun was shining, hot and high and unapologetic. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I walked to my office. The sign on the glass door still made me smile. Whitmore Financial Transitions, helping women navigate what comes next. My first appointment that afternoon was with a woman in her late 50s, recently widowed, unsure how to manage the money her husband had left behind. I welcomed her in with a smile, poured her tea, listened to her story, because I knew now there is life after betrayal. There is strength after silence. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is begin again. 6 months later, I stood in my office kitchen, making a cup of tea between client calls. The leaves outside had turned burnt orange, deep rust, gold so rich it almost hurt to look at. Charleston in November was always beautiful in a subdued, understated way, like a woman who no longer needed to be noticed to feel powerful. Business was good, better than good. Whitmore Financial Transitions had grown from a side project into something real, something solid. I now had 2 part-time associates, smart, capable women who had left high-stress corporate jobs to do work that actually mattered. We didn't just talk numbers. We talked fear, freedom, and futures. Most of my clients were women like me, not just widows and divorcees, but women who had spent decades making everyone else's dreams possible, until one day they realized no one had made room for theirs. Helping them felt like helping an earlier version of myself crawl out from under a life that had grown too small. Fiona visited every other weekend. She'd moved into a brownstone apartment near her new office and painted her kitchen cabinets sage green. She'd started dating someone, a kind, quiet software engineer named Devin, who once brought me homemade apple muffins. He was nothing like her father. That was the point. You look lighter, Fiona said during one of our Sunday brunches. You laugh more. I breathe more, I replied. It was true. The old tension in my shoulders, the constant mental checklist of Russell's moods, his deadlines, his crises, it was gone. I no longer built my life around avoiding someone else's disappointments. Now I built things for me. The garden behind the house had flourished. I had planted lavender and lemon balm, replaced the patio furniture, painted the fence myself over 3 weekends. Sometimes I sat out there at dusk, glass of wine in hand, and listened to the wind move through the trees. No noise, no apology, just air and breath and space. Russell had moved out of state. The last I heard, he was renting a condo in Florida. His business had folded. He tried to start another one, but word had gotten around. Even old friends were reluctant to invest. Once the glitter peeled away, all that was left was someone who didn't know how to exist without being adored. I didn't miss him. I didn't hate him either. He was just a chapter, one with too many footnotes and not enough meaning. Sometimes I thought about that day at Fiona's graduation. The toast he never finished. The envelope I slid across the table. That wasn't just the moment everything changed. That was the moment I remembered who I was. A woman who had built a home, raised a daughter, carried a marriage, paid the bills, smoothed the storms, endured the silence, and finally let it all burn. Not in rage, but in release. I glanced at the framed quote above my desk, something Fiona had given me after the hearing. A simple line printed in gold. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. I smiled. My phone buzzed. A new client referral. A woman in her early 60s, recently divorced. Scared, I sent a warm reply and scheduled her consultation for Thursday. Then I took a breath, looked out the window, and stepped into the next part of my life,